Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Shoe Fits Digital Institute live broadcast. This is Easy Ways to Build Your Blogging Muscle. Sherry Fitz is going to be our leader for the next hour, president of Shoe Fits Marketing, popular speaker, also author of the newly published Deconstructing Digital, which is going to make a special guest appearance later on in the broadcast here today. My name is James Hilliard, glad to be on board, helping out, moderate, and guide the show here. Mel, welcome to you. Revy, thanks for being on board. We got John, Bobby out there as well. Everyone else, thank you all for taking time to join us here today. And Sherry, we're talking about blogging today. Before we dive into slides and some of the good content that you're going to share, we're obviously talking to financial advisors, related professionals, right? So let me ask you an investment question to kick things off. This investment, though, is about time. What's the time commitment that you believe our listeners need to invest in blogging, be it daily, weekly, monthly? What's that time investment? Because I know sometimes that's what scares people from blogging. They don't think they have the time to do it. How do you respond to that?
Well, hi everybody. Um, wow. So I guess, what's interesting about this, James, is that it'll take as much time as you want it to take. Now, I mean, you have to kind of understand where it fits into your practice and how it fits into your overall marketing strategy. But if I could implore and inspire you to spend 5 hours a month creating content so that you've got one blog post a month as a piece of, as a starting point for your blogging efforts, I would say that would be perfect. Now, I understand, obviously, that then you have to kind of put it through compliance, and there's a lot of other kind of things that you need to go through. But if you could just start out with 5 hours a month, and what I mean by that is that's the all-in piece of it. That's the brainstorming about the topics, that's the writing it, that's the editing it, all that stuff. I feel like you could get some good stuff accomplished in less than that time.
Well, I think what we've done then, and let's kind of structure then, folks, the rest of the hour here. We'll break down. Sherry's going to do the breaking down. I'll have some ideas, and of course, I'll mix in your questions and comments. If you do have any questions or comments, or you want to stop on down, drill a little deeper, use the Q&A module to do so. I'll be watching all those, and I'll mix that in as we go along. But we'll break it down into how you can do exactly that. Brainstorm the ideas. We'll talk a little bit about tech. There are some applications and actual real human beings out there that can help you along the way. So some of those ideas will be shared with you. I'll be also, keep an eye on your chat tab, because I'll be sending out several links to you throughout. We're not going to have you jumping out to them during the presentation, but these are things that you can copy and paste, really have easy access to, so you can check out some of these applications and some other the websites that we're going to share with you. They're going to help you along the way. And again, building this muscle, the whole idea here is that you're going to be practicing and growing your abilities here. So with that, again, keep the questions and comments coming on in, and Sherry, with that, let's kind of start giving them some of the tactical ideas and things that you can work on.
Before we get started, crew, I just wanted to say that it's been an amazingly challenging week for America and the world. And the other day, Greg and I went down to the Morrison Bridge in Portland, is lit up in the rainbow flag. And it was actually too light out still. It doesn't get dark in the summertime till around 9:30, and we're senior citizens, so we didn't see the lights. But what I thought was precious and dear was on our way home, we saw a rainbow in the sky. It's been very stormy in Portland this week, and I think it's because the storms come in, the storms go out, and the rainbows are in between. And anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge what a hard week it's been. And so I hope you have rainbows wherever you are. I really hope that. So also, I need to reintroduce you to my fabulous Newfoundland Abu, because we record these from my home office, and she's sleeping, and she probably won't wake up, but if she does wake up, you might hear her. So I try to get her to take selfies with me. It's rather difficult to get them in focus, but I'm getting better. The picture on the right was actually a picture of her right after she got groomed. So she's looking all lovely, new haircut and everything. But she might make an entrance. So this is Abu. She's 9 years old, going on 4, and weighs about 110 pounds. She's mostly fur. So the first thing, though, that I want to do, James, is I want to find out why blog at all. I'd love to know kind of why you are thinking of blogging. So take a minute or two and pop in some ideas in the poll that James just launched.
Yeah, this is I love some of the options here. The aren't we supposed to? It kind of feels that way, and sometimes people do things because they feel that they're supposed to do it, and that's not always the best route. And I know for me, in my world, I had done it for thought leadership. That was one of the things that I was thinking of because I wanted to be able to take a lot of the experience I had done in these things like webcasts and podcasts, and I wanted to do that. And so that's where my kind of starting point was. A little sneak peek here, Sherry. That's where a fair amount of your audience today is saying. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the poll open for about 5 more seconds. We've had the majority of the folks out there vote on this. So if you want to share with us why you're either blogging, why you started, or why you're thinking about it. Is it the client communications, thought leadership, that website content, social media content, right? You want to bump up what you're doing on LinkedIn or Facebook or other places, or is it that aren't we supposed to? So 2 seconds, 1 second, and you'll see that with this group out here, let me go ahead and share those results so everyone sees it. Just over half your audience today, Sherry, looking at that thought leadership, right? Wanted to put that out there. A couple on that aren't we just supposed to? And that's kind of, and we'll talk about that. I know you'll have some comments there. No one on the social media front, and maybe does that surprise you at all that no one's looking to that? I know there's not as much social media work at times in the financial services industry, so maybe not as much of a surprise there.
Well, I think that it all kind of is connected together, and here's the reasons why I think that people should be blogging. And you'll notice that social media is only one of the reasons. I think that thought leadership is critical. I think that it's also a way to build brand visibility, increase the frequency of visitors to your website, content for your website, feeding the Google beast, and we'll talk about that more, client outreach. Those are all things that I believe a blog is supposed to do. And I think you know, we've talked about this before, how social media is and how it interacts with your website. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And no, I'm not surprised because I only gave them one choice. So they had to pick one. They had to pick one. So let's kind of look a little bit more here about why this idea of thought leadership. And I'm looking back because we've talked about this before. But by becoming thought leaders, professional services firms garner enormous business benefits. They become the go-to providers for their expertise. That's really the purpose of thought leadership, really, is to have people begin to see you as the person in their neighborhood, in their community, etc., that really kind of leads on this topic of finances and financial advice, etc. And thought leaders write, which is what blogging is, and thought leaders speak, which is what webinars are or speaking is. And they publish research, and they use social platforms to amplify that content. Thought leadership, in a nutshell, is just sharing your smarts. This webcast is an example of thought leadership. I do it once a month. I do it so that I can push myself to continue to create thought leadership content and around a specific topic, right? So it's sharing your smarts over and over and over again in a way that's consumable to your audience. Because what we want is we want you to stand for something so much that people are going to flock to you. You're here. You're choosing to spend an hour of your day with me. Thank you. And this is similarly something that you can execute in your particular practice. And I've told you this before. I really believe that let's just take 5 hours from your cold calling efforts a month and let's just apply them to blogging and thought leadership and strategy around that. because I know it will return better ROI for you and your practice. And probably one of the biggest reasons to blog in the first place is to serve the Google beast and to serve Google in the way that people use it as a research resource, right? So they come to you, they have heard your name, they refer to you or whatnot, and probably the second thing they're going to do after they write down your name is go to Google and look you up, right? And by having valuable, right, timely, ongoing content on your website, you are validating your expertise and your thought leadership. In our world now, content is king. Content is king, and Google is a hungry beast, and your website needs to be treated as if it's almost like a publishing site. I've often thought about changing the name from ShoeFits Marketing to ShoeFits Media. We are in the publishing business. Marketing is now really publishing, just using different avenues, but the core of it is valuable, timely, relevant content. Content is king. So I want to talk today about easy ways to build your blogging muscle, because writing is a muscle, you know, just like running is a muscle, and I'm learning that I have abs at Pilates or whatever, and I want to talk about where to start, what to say, how to find time to get the writing done, and just a little bit about sucky headlines. because I need you to also walk away today with understanding the power of a headline. And you probably already know that intuitively, but you don't execute it in your writing life. So let's talk about how to get started. I want to focus on three things. You've got to be clear about your target market. You need to understand what your message is, and then you have to really start to build a voice, your voice. Who else should we target? Market2Nist is a fantastic site, by the way, that you might want to just go and play around in. You can license these editorial cartoons for like $35 a pop or whatnot, which I really think is fantastic. And as a side note, there are likely other sites where you can license cartoons if you're doing presentations like this. But it is very true when I spend some time with advisors or other financial professionals and I ask them who their target market is, they say, well, women. And I said, well, women, by the way, are not a niche or a target market. We make up 51% of the population. So, and then their next response is women in transition, and my answer is women are always in transition. So I want you to understand who your target market is, because the tighter that you could get on your niche, the easier it will be for them to find you. And the easier it will be for you to create what I call, and what marketers call, a client persona. So client personas are these kind of marketing term of trying to really even describe your client, and maybe even down to the name of that particular client. So generation, gender, occupation, education, income, who influences them, what does their day look like, what kind of technology do they use, how long is their commute, what's their favorite food, where do they go to grocery shop. I know that feels kind of frivolous, but the more that you can get an idea of who your clients are or who you want them to be, your content will speak to them in an even better and more influential way. So other questions are, you know, what's keeping them up at night? What do they worry about? And I want you to think about what they worry about beyond money. Where do they get existing content? How might they be worried about working with you? There are many, many concerns people have about their money, and many concerns people have about working with a financial advisor, because they don't know what they don't know. What do these people love to do, and what do they hate? What would make them laugh, right? Or, as in the words of Marie Forleo, spit out their coffee. What do you believe in? What do you love to do? How is that aligned with your clients' personas. This cannot be understated as a very valuable piece of starting to create marketing and marketing content. And it's not just the demographics, so it's not just women over 50 living in, Las Vegas or whatever, right? But it's also the psychographics, what keeps them up at night, what do they believe, what are they afraid of, what makes them happy, happy, happy. So these two pieces together really start to put together an even clear picture of who your client personas are. So if you need help on that, I would absolutely go to Google. I would look up the term client persona, and then I'd move over to the images side and start to look at examples of client persona. One really fabulous bit of work by MailChimp, which is a great email marketing engine, by the way, and a blog post by MailChimp that James is going to put that link in the chat section, but it talks about the research that they did about starting to think who are the people that use MailChimp and how did they get there, right? And you'll notice that Mario is self-reliant, right? Whereas Eliza is extra busy and social. And these are just a beautiful demonstration of a client persona. Let me answer the question that I'm certain that you're asking, which is what happens if I have multiple clients or multiple client personas? What I would probably do if I were you is keep it as narrow as you possibly can, and then start to see the psychographics and demographics that unite them all, if at all possible, particularly the psychographics. But what you might have to do is have to have different doors into your website. As an example, you might have to have, busy executive door and a business owner door and a nonprofit door. You might have to you might have to have different doors on your website so those people can identify themselves and go down that particular path. But I really suggest that you read the article that MailChimp did on their client personas. I'm in the process of kind of shifting a few things as it relates to my business at ShoeFits and really leading with speaking and training. And my client personas will shift a little bit because the people who will be writing the checks are different than people who have been writing the checks before. So what's important to a sales manager in charge of a large distribution wholesaling group is completely different than what's important to an advisor or an independent advisor or an advisor starting out. So you can see how the messaging would change, which means the content of your blogs would change. I've showed you this picture before, but I find it very funny and also very fascinating that I believe 3 of these dating apps use the same technology. They have just overlaid the technology with specific messaging for their specific audience. Now, that doesn't mean, by the way, that as an example, I was called upon to be the CMO for a startup for a while, and they were very interested in reaching out to women, but they really didn't want to take that deep into their brand experience. They just wanted to, in a lot of people's words, paint it pink, which you have to be careful about that. But the deeper that you can get in your client experience that meets these client personas, the better you'll resonate with them and obviously keep them and get referrals from them. So if we know who our target market is, then what are we going to do about our message to those particular people? And the first thing that I would do before I would start really kind of blasting things out to the world is start to listen. And there are some really great resources for you to start to listen, and one of them is Google Alerts. You can set up Google Alerts for your company, your competitors, on a particular subject or whatnot, but you can start to get articles that are authored by people and start to look at them and go, why did I like that? Why do I think that applies to this particular market? What did they do well? What did they do poorly? Was that long enough? Was it too long? Etc. So you can use Google Alerts. Now, the thing about Google Alerts is that if you set them up, like as an example on the topic of financial stress, you'll get an email either weekly or daily or as it happens with this kind of Google synopsis of the articles that have kind of come across the Google sphere. I don't want you to necessarily get more emails. Just as long as you read mine, I'm fine with that. But Google Alerts might be good for your name. There are some really great listening resources that have popped up that start to look at this world of blogging and social and whatnot. And two that I use are BuzzSumo and Mention.net. And I'm going to show you the BuzzSumo interface for two reasons. One, the free interface is much deeper and relevant than the Mention.net. So in this particular case on BuzzSumo, under their free account, I'm looking up the term financial literacy. And what I've been able to find, and let me get my cute little pen out here for a minute. So here's where I put in the financial literacy piece. But this tells me recently, so in the past month, the articles that have been shared kind of in the social space or reported, and how often they've been shared. So financial literacy being a topic, the last month there are 35 pages, right, of kind of reporting and stats on how that content has been shared. Now, the way that BuzzSumo works is you just get the first page, but you can start to see what's resonating with people and then consider whether that topic might be appropriate for you. So you can do, I believe you could do 3 searches a day. The thing that I also find lovely about BuzzSumo is it allows me to look at the influencers of a particular topic as well. So let's go down to this one. So now I'm under the influencer tab, and these are the top influencers on this particular subject. And I'm able to see really kind of how many followers they have on Twitter, right? And you know, help me kind of work my way back to somebody that I might want to copy. As an example, Michael Kitces. Michael Kitces is a prolific writer and blogger and social media, and he has a $1.8 billion portfolio. And he is a speaker and a writer, and he does not do any cold calling. So this BuzzSumo, again, is a free way to start listening and looking and finding people that you can mimic and or learn from. So I highly recommend kind of checking that out just for fun. You can kind of get lost in the research. The other thing that I use as a way to start to kind of learn what kind of content out there, and I use this also for curating content, but I use Feedly, and Feedly is an RSS reader, so real simple syndication, and I've been creating over time a series of different almost like magazines for myself. So I can go in on any particular day and I can look up the articles or the authors or the websites that I have filed under my financial stress area and start to look at content here. So 5 benefits on educating employees on financial fitness. Well, that would be something that I might want to dive in a little bit more to as an example. And maybe as I'm getting my feet wet in this social area, I might just share that. But maybe I might find it valuable to tuck into my back pocket and go, there's some interesting research there. I want to look at that a little bit more and possibly consider how I might start to share this idea of, oopsie, sorry about that, of how education reduces financial stress. I have a list on my Twitter account, as do many people, and I have a list on my Twitter account of the top 100 social advisors. It started in 2003, but every year Brightscope reissues a list, and so I continue to kind of add advisors to this list. You could absolutely go and subscribe to my Twitter list. Anybody can. It's a public list in this particular case. And start to look at what are these advisors sharing and whether that fits your style of social engagement. Pretty helpful. So I see the world of social, and I've talked about this. Three things you need to do. You need to create content, you need to curate, which is other people's content, and you need to connect. I have said before that I believe that you can outsource creating and curating, that you cannot outsource to the connecting piece. That really needs to be you or needs to be somebody who really, really knows you well. But if we flip that around, if we turn it around, then the connecting piece is really all about listening. The curating piece is all about leveraging other people's content, and the creating piece is about leading. So listening first is a great place to get started. Starting to leverage other people's content is a way to dip your toe into critical thinking and why do you like that article, and maybe you'll want to share that with folks. And then leading is certainly creating your own content.
Hey, Sherry, on this leverage point, I want to hang here for just a quick second before we go through kind of the process of creating some of the content. I see some people that I follow, I'll follow their blog, and all it is share, 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 but I don't get a whole lot of their commentary. Typically, once I kind of recognize that, I stop following that individual, or I don't pay as much attention because, okay, they're sharing stuff, but I kind of wanted to hear their voice. How important is that to you in terms of the leverage piece, right? Balancing the, hey, let me share this, but also maybe explain why I'm sharing it.
Oh, I think that and I believe that that's kind of one of the reasons why I think it's fun to kind of start with curating content, because you do need to start to create a voice. And for those folks who are concerned about writing because it might just be too scary for them, or maybe 5 hours is just not any time they have in a month right now, certainly leveraging or curating content is another way. And I always include, what's my perspective on this? What's my perspective on this, educating employees about financial, fitness or whatever? What's my perspective? Why do I think that point number 4 is even more critical than point number 1, as an example? But so just liking something and or just resharing it, not really an effective way to connect and or build thought leadership. You're just really adding to the noise. I want your voice infused in what you do online. Good question, James. So let's talk about creating content for a moment. And I want to talk about mind mapping. So I'm going to skip to this, and I'm going to talk specifically about mind mapping. Mind mapping is a way to engage both your left and your right brain at the same time. And when I mind map, I tend to set myself a timer. So I may set myself a timer for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and what I do is keep writing until my timer goes off, even if it's just ridiculousness that I end up doing. In this particular case, let's take a look at what could have been a mind map for this particular presentation. And in fact, it's a nice way to kind of do an outline. So if we've got this major topic of blogging, then what are all the issues around blogging? So what's the technology? How are we going to know what to say? How do we take the blog and then do social outreach? And then I go deeper in the what to say thing about, well, what about my target audience? And then what about my topic generation? So you can start to see how this mind mapping is a wonderful way for you to get every tiny little bit of content. One of the worries that I hear from people when we start talking about blogging and creating content is, I'm going to run out of things to say. And I will tell you that you will never run out of things to say. Once you develop a voice and you create those muscles, you will see opportunities everywhere of where you've got, do I leave, in Portland as an example, there's this debate going on, should we just pay servers in restaurants an adequate wage and not tip them? So how might that fit into our world of financial services, and where, you know, how might, you know, who knows? But there's just opportunity everywhere. I also think the other thing is that we forget that we know so much about a field that many Americans don't know about. And I want to go beyond this whole dollar cost averaging and tax benefits and stocks versus bonds. But, you know, those are people, those are kind of high level things, and I would say that kind of be first level stuff, but there's so much more to know about investing. I would even say money and purpose, money stories, money and family. There's so much more deeper that you could go with your content. You will not run out of ideas. And if you do, just call me. Because I'm sure within 5 minutes we could do a mind map and you could get more content. Here's an interesting one. This is when I first started Shoe Fits, and I was at a National Speakers Association thing, specifically talking about blogging, and I wanted to start thinking about this whole idea of social media for financial advisors. So I was like, what are the issues that advisors face? Well, compliance, time, what to say, you know, how to use it, what about using it, you know, with manners and first impressions? This is, and if you took all of these kind of little itsy-bitsy things on the outside edge, what you would find is most of those blogs have been written by now. I mean, but I could continue to go deeper and deeper. Because look at how I've taken just a little subsection of social media, right, and digital marketing, and we're talking just about blogging. And we're not even going to scratch the surface of blogging, really, because there's so much to be said. So this idea of mind mapping and setting a timer will really help you kind of get started. The other thing is that on a daily basis we all get probably way too many emails. However, some of those emails have things in it that are valuable. Back to this piece on Feedly where we saw that article about financial fitness for employees and how that's valuable. If I decided to kind of read that or scan that or whatnot, I might go, wow, that's kind of cool. So what I do is I put that idea into my vault. And what I use for my idea vault is Evernote. So I pay up for Evernote. I do the professional piece just because it allows, I don't know what it allows me, but it allows me more notebook and a little bit more pieces to it. But I have a whole notebook in Evernote just on blog ideas. And then I have one on articles to read, which it's just me being kind of an information hoarder. But I, you know, I'm starting to, you know, I come across cool websites and I think to myself, wow, I want to hang on to that. So I'm going to put that into my cool website thing. The Digital Institute, as I'm researching things and resources to show you, as we've been walking through this Digital Institute this year, I pop those into that notebook so that wherever I am, I have access to it on my iPad, I have access to it on my computer, and I have access to it on my iPhone. You'll see that I have a recipes one. So when I'm at the grocery store, by the way, and I'm like, I want to make that lamb pozole, which is actually quite delicious and fantastic, I don't have to remember what's in it or whatever, although by now I should. All I do is open up Evernote and there's the recipe. So I like Evernote. It helps keep crap out of my email and keep my head clean because I know I can, if I'm sitting with a blank cursor and committing to my business coach that I'm going to write for 5 minutes a day and I don't know what to write about, I can go straight to my blog ideas and go, well, that was something I thought was interesting. I'm going to start writing. So, so we talked about your target market. We talked about your listening first and starting to think through stuff, and then how to start generating ideas. Now let's talk about voice just a bit, because voice is this idea of you being youer, and only you can be you. When people read my blogs, they say, wow, it sounds just like you're speaking to me. And thankfully, that's just how I can write. I missed the writing class where I learned how to write formally. For me to feel comfortable about writing, I pretend that I'm talking to you. That's how I navigate that. It's just easier for me. And so my voice comes through. I'm very casual. I use exclamation points, but not an overabundance of exclamation points. I do have an obsession about commas and dashes, but I also share personal stories. So I am who I am, right? I am who I am, who I am. Now, when you show up with meetings with clients, you may be more formal. You might be more casual, and you might be just straight up old school. And that's absolutely fine. I just want your voice, how you write your voice. I want it to match who you are. So if you're brainy, be brainy, right? Michael Kitces is brainy, but also very accessible and casual. If you're funny, be funny. If you use slang, use slang. Um, and depending on your audience, if you cuss, cuss. Not extensively, but I was doing a closing keynote for a startup crew, and the audience was startup people in Portland, Oregon, completely different than financial advisors in a more kind of formal setting. And so there were a few times that I used some words that I would never use in this environment. So I have to kind of shift things around, but I want you to be as you can be, and that takes practice. I bring in personal stories because the more stories that you bring in, the better the hook. I don't just start talking about this idea of taking risks because there's no dating, right? I don't just jump into what I want you to take away. I try to tell you how I got there. And this example of just push send was a long post that I did on LinkedIn some time ago. I think it was actually one of the very first ones I did on LinkedIn posts. And it tells a story about how what I learned when I went to my aunt's funeral. And that article has been viewed and shared over and over again. And it includes a personal story. People don't trust financial services. We need to be more authentic, which is a word that I'm not necessarily fond of because it seems to be overplayed, but let's just say, back to the whole you than you. The more authentic we can be, the more accessible we can be, and the more people will know, like, and trust us. I do want to tell you and introduce you to somebody who kicks ass at blogging and training people how to blog. Her name is Susan Weiner, and she walks her talk. She creates content. She interacts in the social sphere in a lovely and gracious manner, and I just want to support her. She's been on my podcast, actually. She did a really great podcast about how to get emails read. So if you haven't listened to that, I would encourage you to listen to that. So I just count her as a professional friend and a generous being, and I wanted to give her a shout out. So she's got a couple things coming up, and one of them is she's got how to write investment commentary people will read, and it's a webinar, and it's a paid webinar, which we're comparing notes on that because I think that's rather interesting. But I know it's going to be packed with value. Don't ask me how much it costs because I don't know, but I've created just a short link there to get you over there. I don't get any referral fee. I don't have a coupon code. I just know that if you want to blog and you need help and you want to coach, Susan's your person. She also has a blogging class that starts in September where she kind of helps you go through step by step, and she will actually review and edit your blogs for you and give you pointers. She's a rock star, and if you don't know her, you should know her. So I'd encourage you to check out her upcoming webinar. Now, when I first started ShoeFits, and I honestly had a writing anxiety. You know, people have math anxiety. I don't have math anxiety. I grew up loving math. I know it's kind of interesting, but math is actually, design and creativity is actually very mathematically based, but we won't get into that. But I grew up loving math. I grew up being very afraid of writing. And I don't know why. I guess, like I said, I missed that particular class about where you're supposed to put a semicolon. So what I would do in order to make this idea of blogging easier for me is I hired an editor. And you've likely all heard about left brain, right brain. And if you're writing, you're engaging your right brain. But if you're editing, you're engaging your left brain. The challenge is if you're writing, you can't be editing at the same time. It becomes really challenging. So now what I do when I write is I plug myself into something called Focus at Will, which I love. It's a music program to help, get alpha waves. But nonetheless, write and write and write and write and write, and I keep writing until my timer goes off, and then I edit. But when I first started ShoeFits, before I had editors on my staff, I would go to some place called Elance and hire an editor. Now, Elance is now changed to Upwork, but I would love for you to, if you can, hire an editor. It will make your sentences tighter. It will make your prose more active instead of passive. Your punctuation will be correct. It will make sense. Things will be structured well. Editors are worth their weight in gold. And you can find some on Elance or Upwork. You can also likely find some in your local community. You could probably even find out from Susan Weiner. She knows of editors. But definitely having an editor will help you get over this weird fear you might have that you are writing and creating something and you're not sure if it's right, and therefore that weird fear of having a voice and stepping out and having an opinion gets in your way of publishing. Having an editor helps clean up all of those things, and you feel that much more confident in publishing those things. Everything I write, with the exception of social media posts, not the short ones, not the long ones, everything I write I have reviewed by a team member and or editor. Just makes it easier and better. Quiet that left brain while you're writing. Did I say that enough? If you don't feel like you want to write, you can talk. Can you talk? Because you can record yourself speaking about a particular subject. Take that, get it transcribed, go in there and edit, because it is easier to edit than it is to write from scratch, and then have somebody edit it. Or you can just talk, send it off to somebody on Upwork or a local writer/person, and they can make sense of it for you, and then you can review it. So speaking your blog as a starting point is a really great place to start. And James, who's the guy who
Yeah,
just...
I was going to say here, Gary Vaynerchuk is a very prolific blogger, marketer out there, and this is all he does. He does not, he's so into the hustle out there of the work that he does. He does not sit down and write. He talks. Those get transcribed, turn into his blogs. Those turn into his books. And it's what he does, and it's I think a great way. And to your point earlier, Sherry, about just being that real person and finding your voice. What more of a voice than your actual voice, and you get some of that idea, and you'll hear also. I think it's a great point. Also, is you can actually listen to yourself, because a lot of times we don't listen to ourselves. So we might write how we think we should write, but not right from who we are. So if you just talk about a topic and go back and listen to yourself, I think that's a great learning experience, because you start hearing how ultimately other people are hearing you, and you hear your own voice. So I love this idea. This is a fabulous idea.
So my commitment to my coach, by the way, is to spend time, 5 minutes a day, just starting to kind of even stretch my blogging muscles even more, because as I go and move into launching my book and really pushing my speaking, anytime, and I write, industry publications will print it for me. The world is hungry for good, relevant content, and the more you write, and the more you continue to write, the more people will ask you to write. And free publicity in Napa Magazine or 401k Specialist, or pick one, business-to-business.com, or Seeking Alpha. Those organizations want to and are desperate for my content, and your content, by the way. Just saying. So find ways that work for you. And one of the things is I walk every morning, so my other commitment is maybe I'll just record myself for 5 minutes. Who knows? You have to just do it to start doing it. This is a picture of one of my walks. It's 282 steps to the top of Mount Tabor, which is an extinct volcano. And I've written about it before. 282 steps. But it's not going to happen unless I take that first step. And writing and blogging is very much like that. And the more I do it, the easier it becomes. And the more I do it, I'll be at conferences and everybody will be, riding the escalator up, the stairs, and I'll be getting my tail up the steps. So, the more muscles you build, the more muscles you have, the easier things become, and actually the more delightful they become, and the more you start to see, like I said, these metaphors everywhere about people and money. So let's talk about what's next really fast. You've seen this before. I love my Macintosh most of the time. You've seen this image before, but here's what I'm trying to talk about, is that you have blogs that are on your website. Now, if your compliance people have a problem with blogs, just call it a newsletter. Blogs used to be this back and forth, meaning having your content open for commentary, and that was the problem that compliance had with that particular commentary. Most people in the blogging world have turned off that commentary. The difference between a blog and a newsletter is I think blogs are first person and more casual. Newsletters are third person, a little bit more formal. That's just my breakdown, but the edges are bleeding, right? The edges are bleeding. But turn off the commentary. You don't need it because trolls are there, and you don't need trolls. You don't need to measure that kind of stuff. So I want your blog on your website because then, I want you to start to look at how you might repurpose it. But let's just be real clear that probably there's going to be 5 people who will read your blog when you first start. And if you're like me, 5 people, one of them is my brother. So I have 4 people that read my blog, maybe. It's more than that now. But what are you hoping to gain as a result of your blog and the content that you create? Well, possibly you want people to click on it and read it. But when I look out there at some of the posts that I see from financial advisors, there's just a lot of sucky headlines. And I wonder about how you might be able to create a better, more compelling headline or clickbait. I'm not suggesting that your headline doesn't match the content inside, but I'm suggesting that possibly look at how you might make your headline better. In fact, it's not in a slide here, but there's something by CoSchedule. So CoSchedule, and if you look up CoSchedule Headline Grader, they have a place where you can stick your headline in and it will give you power words, emotion words, etc., and it will give you a kind of report card on your headline, and you can start to look at how you might change your headlines around. In fact, that's what we use when we're trying to name these various Digital Institute programs, is we go in and kind of grade our little headlines, and we shoot for getting over like 75% or whatnot. So we try to go for a B or an A. BuzzFeed is a great place to go to learn how to write good headlines. But let's just talk about when you share stuff in the social thing, please, oh please, do not call it a blog. This is an example of this particular organization who just posted a blog, and when they posted it on LinkedIn, all they did when they posted it is that they said, new blog, new blog, new blog. And interesting, all at the same time. So bless their marketing person's heart. That's really not good that you've got 3 people from the same firm saying the same thing at exactly the same time, and all the compelling thing that they can say is new blog. So 1, the headline of your blog should be compelling, and 2, when you post it, what are you going to say to get people to read it? Oftentimes what I do is take a quote out of the guts of my blog post and put it up into as I'm sharing it. So do not call it a blog. Do not say the same thing as your team members, and do not post the updates all at the same time. I see a typo right there. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can recycle, reuse, and repurpose, because I am from Portland, Oregon, and we recycle everything, even, coffee grounds. And yeah. Let's talk about how you might use your blog, because back to the point that maybe only 5 people are going to read it, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, okay? First off, we're trying to make sure that when people come to your site, they're validated your expertise in your building, your thought leadership. That's critical. So 1, you get website content. 2, that obviously feeds the Google beast. You can also take that exact content and repost it as a LinkedIn long post. Now, if you talk to people who are search engine optimization junkies, they will say that's not good. You will get downgraded from Google because they don't like to see the same content in multiple places. But 1, it's just your content. 2, I'm not necessarily using content as a search engine tool, although it is very important. But most people say that in most cases, if you have duplicate content, it doesn't necessarily add to your search engine, but it doesn't necessarily take away. So website content, repurpose it on LinkedIn. Use it as an outbound newsletter, because people are not coming to your website to read it. So take the same article and push it out to people. Submit that article and or articles like it to local associations and publications. You could read it aloud, like I'm reading this list, and create a podcast. You could take your blogs and various blogs, and you could compile them into a helpful guide. I have 100 social media success tips. Those success tips came from a variety of different blogs as a starting point. You can use it as an outline for a webinar, or you can use a webinar as a starting point for a blog. This webinar, by the way, is being transcribed and cut into a series of 3 or 4 articles. The Journey to Blogging, which will be published by an industry publication. It's due next Wednesday. So 5 hours of creating content, let's repurpose it. Let's get tons ROI. So let me just give you an example of how this works. Here's an article that I wrote a while ago about Martha Stewart and how she can teach advisors about obsolescence, because she totally didn't have her act together from a social perspective. So there's the article as it exists on shoefits.com, right here. Here's the article as it exists when we send it out as a newsletter. So it's a very long one. And by the way, recent studies show longer is better. More engagement, better content, not just stupid clickbait, really valuable. So in doing some research around this, long or short, most people point to longer is better. So in this particular case, what I did was we just did a synopsis about what was in the article and then linked to it on the email. Right? So website content, email content. Then, oh, come on, people. Then I take that same content and I post it as a long post on LinkedIn. Same content. Then guess what? That Martha Stewart content is part of Chapter 1 in my new book. You still need to buy my book, by the way, but it's part of Chapter 1 in my new book. So do you see how you can use your 5 hours really well, because you can repurpose. So repurpose. Just throwing that out there. So James, why don't we spend just a few minutes and see if we've got some questions to answer, and then I have some blatant propaganda and marketing to share.
Absolutely. You just started talking a little bit about the length, and that was a question here from a couple of folks. Are we looking at 200 words? Do we go 500 words? Is there any type of formula? And specifically towards the financial world, have you found any trends there?
Well, so I think that the challenging thing is, what I would like you to do is just start writing 350 to 500 words a month. What you'll find is the more you write, the more you end up writing. So this particular article about Martha Stewart, I didn't know it was going to be so long. tends to be that once I kind of get rolling on content, it is easier. Now, I still have someone edit it and try to tighten it up. But if you could just start thinking 350, that's actually what? 4 paragraphs? I don't know, 5 paragraphs max. It depends on your subject, and it depends on your audience. But I'd like you to shoot for a longer one if you can, but start with 350.
There was a piece of advice that someone shared with me before, and I would love your take on this. It goes back to the idea of the personas. Do you ever write and you're thinking about a person that you're writing
Yes.
to, and has that helped you? That was advice given to me sometimes when I'm doing a podcast. I'll think about someone in that persona, but I'll get it down to even an individual. Now, I won't call out that person's name as I'm doing the event, but that really sometimes helps me focus and helps me talk in my normal voice, my normal persona, because then I'm comfortable. It's, oh yeah, I know talking to Dale and what that's like, so now I can really talk or write to Dale, and obviously then Dale becomes that larger persona. Thoughts?
Yes, totally. So when I am writing or when I am creating a podcast, I do form an image of the person in my mind. And the closer that I can get to that particular person, the better the content is. And in fact, the one time when I feel like I really nailed it, and from an email perspective, I got a 25% open rate. So yes, the more you can visualize somebody in your mind. So when I'm doing a podcast and when I'm talking to people whom I'm interviewing on my podcast, I'm like, it's a growth-oriented woman. She's either in middle management or just starting in the industry. She sees opportunities for herself and doesn't know which step to take. You know, her name is Julie. You know, she works here. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So I really, and I'm with you, James, the more that you can get closer to the individual, the better. And let's talk about a topic idea as an example. What questions does Julie have? Listen in to your particular clients and or their concerns. What questions do they have? Those are great blog ideas.
No, absolutely.
And, you know, yeah, yeah.
Last question here, and then we do want to share some more info. This was about services out there, and I know there are services for financial pros where they can just kind of sign up and get syndicated content. My wife is a marriage family therapist. She tried some of that, but that content didn't speak like she speaks. It didn't speak to her. She didn't think it was doing a good job speaking to her audience. So the value in there of looking for, because we've talked a little bit about curating content, is there value in some of that, or how do you have to think about whether or not that type of service is going to be useful for you?
I am not a fan of canned content, and I also know that it serves a purpose. And in fact, we have canned content for retirement plan advisors because nobody in the industry has decent canned content for retirement plan advisors. So we've got canned content that we can license to people that's pretty evergreen. But I don't, you know, I was at a conference and I was doing a digital genius bar, and the number of advisors came up. They're like, look at my website. And I said, I already have. I saw it 3 minutes ago from somebody who has a canned website with a canned video that looks exactly the same as yours. So the only difference is your logo. So I'm not really, you know, if you're, let's just say if you're paying $300 a month for some kind of canned content or whatnot, take that $300 and spend it on an editor, or, you know, somebody who can transcribe stuff for you. The more, listen, gang, the fiduciary rule is pushing down. Commoditization is inevitable for some advisors. The bolder, the bigger, the more you can step out and have a voice and have an opinion and be different and be unforgettable, the better for you. And buying somebody else's content and just slapping it on because that's what we're supposed to do is not going to really move the needle. It's not going to me, that's my opinion, but if you want to be different, buying somebody else's content is not going to make you different. You have a unique perspective on the world. I want you to be youer than you. That's why people work with you. You have a heart that's different. You have purpose that's different. Okay, I'm done preaching, but you kind of get it. Spend the money on an editor instead. Spend the money on a writing coach. You know, take Susan's blogging class.
Yeah,
Start writing.
invest in yourself so that you become better at telling your own story relating to your customers instead of filling someone else's pocket with stuff that's really probably not going to get opened or read or is going to just seem like you don't care. You're just kind of throwing something out there because you should. I see a bunch of realtors in my area that do the same thing. It's that canned type of content they put in their newsletters. And it's like, I just read that same thing from this guy. And I just think about someone's making money off that, but they're not doing a better job selling real estate. So why, again, for your audience here. Sherry, a bunch of handouts over in the GoToWebinar tool that we have. One of them, folks, is the speaking menu for Sherry. As you know, that she's making that little pivot there, doing more of the speaking out there available for those speaking engagements. So that kind of a menu list of some of the things going on. A little more, Sherry, we want to take last night 2 minutes here, just kind of some of the other resources and follow-ups for folks.
So a couple things I wanted to kind of let you guys know about. One of the keynotes that I've been doing significantly is called Your Brand, Your Business, Your Bottom Line, and it really is taking a look at what the fiduciary rule is going to do to our industry and how to stand out and be different. And it's been extraordinarily positive. And if you are on an events committee or you are part of a broker-dealer or you host advisor or third-party administrator events of any kind, I really would encourage you to look at that, your brand, your business, your bottom line. It's different. Everybody's talking about the fiduciary rule. We got that. We've got lawyers. We've got everybody else. Now, what are you going to do with your business from a tactical perspective? So I do encourage you to take a look at that. I'm headed to Boston. Actually, I'm speaking at the Commonwealth Retirement Plan Advisor Conference, and I'm talking about the mathematics of marketing. So it's a little bit of branding, but then an awful lot about, okay, how do you start to put all these pieces together and make them work for you, and what are the moving pieces and how to do a marketing plan. One of the things that is in the handout is a template, a marketing template where you can start to put your blog titles in and or, you know, your lead magnet that we talked about in the deconstructing digital piece. So I would ask for your help. Please share the love. I love to speak. I'm speaking all over the place, and I want to, you know, rock fourth quarter and 2017 with more of that. As a side note, I also do training for sales teams, so internal teams at mutual fund companies and other platforms about how to optimize social from their perspective. And as a heads up, we have a social selling class that's coming up again in July. It'll start July 11th. We had an awesome crew in the last batch. We got great feedback. People are changing stuff up and being really clear about their brand, and they've gone through this process of thinking about who their niche is, and it's exciting to see what's going on with them and how they're able to kind of use this social world to drive business. That's going to start on July 11th. If you're interested in knowing more about that, I'd be happy to kind of keep you on the list. We'll be starting to market that pretty hot and heavy next week. And if you want to be in on the early registration discount or whatever, if you could crank that poll, James, so we know, raise your hand, and we'll make sure that you are on that early discount list.
Yeah, perfect. That's out there. And again, we'll leave the player open for a couple moments here as you continue on that, again, the handouts tab. That's where you've got a bunch of those resources. Also, if you want right now, you can go back through the chat tab. I put out a bunch of links to all of you. If you haven't had a chance to click on those links and maybe bookmark them for later, with the GoToWebinar tool, you can just go in there and you should be able to just, again, select that whole thing just with your mouse and then copy the whole chat tab. And really, it's just going to give you then a list of all those things from BuzzSumo to the Google Alerts. We've got the link for the persona example. So all that stuff is in there. So if you want to take a moment to capture all of that, I encourage you to do so. That way you have it as a little resource to go back in. Stick it in your Evernote, and then you can get back in there and check out that content. And it looks like, Sherry, most of the folks here put in their words. So let me close that down. And then, again, final kind of idea here, and then we will wrap things up.
Next month, July 21st, we're going to do some, it's the National Delight Your Customers Day, or one of them. So we're going to talk about client experience and customer experience and how to delight them. And that will be in July. I don't think you in August. I believe I'm going to be in a very large and broad desert outside of Nevada. I'll tell you more about that, I'm sure, or you'll hear about it. But if you want to get a hold of me or talk to me about anything, here's how you can do it. If you're interested in learning more about speaking and or the course, you reach out to info@shoefits.com. You can find me there too. So thank you very much. And yes, this webinar will be available. Usually takes us about a week to get everything kind of up and rolling on the website and on YouTube, another way to repurpose content and appeal to the second largest search engine in the world. So yes, it will be up and ready to go next week, if not sooner. I hope you all have a wonderful day and kick-ass weekend, and that you have lots of rainbows wherever you live.
Yeah, good stuff, Sherry. Folks, thanks. Look for those archives to be up there, and we'll talk to you again next month. Thanks all.